Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the UIA overview. My name is Debbie Sasko, and I'm the VP of Information Services. Joining me today are two of our program managers, Stacy Fagan and Sherry Parnell. Today, we plan to cover some of the frequently asked questions received from UIA motor carriers and provide an overview of some of the features and functionalities available within the UIA application. We do plan to reserve time at the end of the session for Q&A, so please feel free to submit any questions you may have in the Q&A panel during the webinar. We will cover as many of these as we can at the end of the session. Any questions we are unable to address during the Q&A session, we will respond directly to the individual following the conclusion of the webinar. With that, let's get started. Benefits of UIA participation. The main benefit being that it only requires your company to execute one interchange contract and submit one certificate of insurance. Therefore, it eliminates the need to issue contracts with each and every equipment provider you wish to do business with, and then also have your agent submit insurance for each of those providers. We take the information you submit to us, and then we transmit that to the equipment providers you do business with. We also have a 24/7 web portal that you can access pertinent information regarding your UIA account as to what your interchange status is with equipment providers you do business with. We provide also that 24/7 access to your insurance agent so that if you have an issue over the weekend and you need them to submit insurance, they have the ability to do so even though there's no one in our office. They can take care of that for you over the weekend. We send notifications regarding any changes to EP addenda, giving you the 30-day advance notice of these types of changes so that you're made aware of any modifications to an EP addenda well in advance. We also notify you if there's issues with your USDOT or Motor Carrier Operating Authority. We check that against FMCSA's SaferSys system as well as the new MODIS system. We provide you proactive notifications regarding upcoming insurance renewals to hopefully avoid you falling into a non-compliant or non-approved status with the providers you do business with. As a UIA participant, you also have the ability to use our street interchange application for those equipment providers that use our SIA app. You can request street turns or street interchange transactions through that web portal, and we capture an electronic record of those transactions. We also have the Equipment Return Location Directory, which provides equipment providers a place to manage their equipment return location information, but from the motor carrier's perspective, provides you a centralized location to obtain that information when you're doing business with UIA equipment providers. The UIA is overseen by a group of industry representatives called the Intermodal Interchange Executive Committee. This group's a 10-member group of industry representatives consisting of motor, ocean, rail, and equipment leasing companies. They have the ultimate decision over changes to the agreement. They constantly review the document to make sure that it's consistent with current business industry practices in the intermodal industry. The group usually meets 3 times a year, February, June, and October. And they are also responsible for any types of revisions to the agreement. And if they do decide to modify the agreement, then there is a process that goes through to ensure that all the participants are aware of those changes. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a coming slide. This group also reviews any type of non-compliant reports. If someone reports that someone is non-compliant under Section 8 in the Administrative Procedures, the IIC is the group that reviews that matter and determines if that party's UIA participation should be canceled for the non-compliant issue. The consist of the committee is reviewed every 4th quarter of the year. There is an IIEC appointment committee that's appointed by INS board that reviews the consist to see if there's any changes that need to be made in regards to membership on the committee. This slide here just shows you the members of the IIC. You can see to the left are all the voting members for each mode, and then to the right, you'll see the alternates for each of those modes. Some of the IIC activities and responsibilities include EP addenda reviews. So anytime an EP requires that or requests that their addenda be revised, that information is sent to the IIC, the modal members of the IIC, for example. ocean carrier requests a modification to its addenda, it would go to the ocean and motor carrier IIC members for review. If it's just a dollar amount, an existing dollar amount that an EP is changing, then it does not require their review, but anything other than that would require the IIC's review before to make sure that the change is consistent and doesn't conflict with the agreement. As I mentioned, the group does review modifications to the base agreement. If they decide that agreement needs to be modified, then those changes would go out for a 30-day comment period to all UIA participants. And at the end of that comment period, we would compile any comments received and send them to the committee for review before they make their final determination whether the agreement should be modified or not. Requests for interpretations to the agreement is also an item that they review. These are definitely not issues when it comes to specific invoicing issues among signatories, but if there is a party that is requesting an interpretation of a provision in the agreement that's not related to an invoicing issue, then the committee has a process under the administrative procedures that they follow in order to give that interpretation. I also mentioned earlier about the noncompliance. There's a section in the administrative procedures, section 8, that deals with noncompliance. So if a party is reported as noncompliant, there's a process that is outlined in the administrative procedures that gives that party the opportunity to correct or refute the violation, the reported violation. And if they don't do so, it could lead to possible cancellation of their participation in the UIIA. And that process is outlined under the administrative procedures under Section 8 of the agreement. There's also the binding arbitration process in which the IIC members serve as the arbitration panelists when they review the cases that are put under this process under Exhibit D of the UIIA. I mentioned earlier about the IIC Appointment Committee, which is the group that's appointed by INO's Board of Directors to review the consists of the committee each year. It consists of a representative from each mode, rail, marine, motor, and equipment leasing company. We send out a notification every October to all participants soliciting anybody's interest in serving on the committee, a list of qualifications you need to meet in order to serve on the committee, and an application that you would complete, and then the IIC Appointment Committee reviews that information at the end of each year and makes recommendations to INO's board at their January meeting for any changes to the following year's committee membership. Some UIA insurance frequently asked questions. We do have motor carriers that ask, if I'm exempt from carrying workers' comp, what do I do? And in that case, you would submit a letter on your company letterhead indicating why you're exempt, and then you would sign that letter and send it back to our office, and we treat that just like an insurance policy and give you 1 year from the date of the letter, and you would need to renew that each year. In regards to a waiver of any type of specific insurance, if, for example, say an equipment provider requires cargo insurance and you haul your own goods, so you don't carry cargo, then the equipment provider has the ability to waive that requirement for you if they want to make that business decision to do so. So the motor carrier would need to contact the equipment provider directly, explain the situation, and then a request that they waive that coverage for them. And then again, it would be up to the individual equipment provider as to whether they do so or not. In regards to insurance expirations, it's always good to make sure that your agent provides your insurance prior to your expiration, because our system expires insurance at 12:01 a.m. on the day of expiration. Although there are some policies that go through the end of the day, because not all policies do that, we have to err on the side of caution. So all of our policies expire at 12:01 a.m. So just make sure your agent gets your insurance to us prior to that expiration date. Billing timeframes under the UIIA. This is another question we get many times from motor carriers. For per diem charges, there's time frame is 60 calendar days from the date the motor carrier returns the equipment, and the only exception to that is if the incorrect party is billed, and then they have a total of up to 90 days to get that billing to you. For M&R charges, for manned gates, it's 165 calendar days from the date of interchange at the time the damage was documented. And AGS gates, the automatic gates, it's 120 calendar days from the date of interchange at the time the damage was documented. And then for over-the-road repairs, It's no later than 90 calendar days from the date of the repair, but an EP can adopt a shorter time frame within its addenda, but it would have to be reciprocal to both the motor carrier and the equipment provider. Enforcement of the UIIA, we do have a dispute resolution process that motor carriers would follow if they were disputing charges with an equipment provider. This is under Section H1 of the UIIA is the default process, but you would always want to check the EP's addenda to make sure that they don't have their own dispute resolution process. The binding arbitration process is a process that can be used if the parties under the dispute resolution process are unable to reach a consensus. Then they would have the ability to submit the matter under the binding arbitration process, and Sherry will talk about that in a few minutes. And then, of course, as I mentioned, compliance with the agreement, which is the Section 8 under the administrative procedures, and this gives opportunity for parties to report noncompliance and gives the party that it has been reported the opportunity to correct or refute the reported violation. And if they don't, as I mentioned, it could lead to possible cancellation of their UIA participation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about the dispute resolution process as well as the binding arbitration process. Sherry?
This is the frequently asked questions dispute resolution. The time frame for a motor carrier dispute an invoice. So you've got 30 days from the date you receive the equipment provider's invoice to dispute it. You want to look for the EP's addendum online on your UIIA account to see if they have a dispute resolution section in their addendum. If they do, you want to use that to properly dispute it with that EP. If they don't, you're going to go to Section H1 of the UIIA. The time frame for an equipment provider to respond to a motor carrier's dispute is 30 days from the receipt of the motor carrier's dispute. So when they receive your dispute, they'll have 30 calendar days to respond to either accept or decline the dispute. Options if parties are unable to resolve the dispute. Either party may opt to use the binding arbitration process afforded to UIIA participants under Exhibit D of the agreement. Party opting to use binding arbitration would have 14 calendar days. Everything is calendar days in the agreement right now. The 30 days for the motor carrier dispute, that's calendar days. So these are weekends, holidays. It's 30 days from the time you receive your invoice. Equipment provider has 30 calendar days from the time they receive your dispute, and then you'll have 14 calendar days from the time that you've received the equipment provider's response, either declining or accepting your dispute. So if you're opting to want to submit that claim for binding arbitration, you have 14 calendar days, again, it's including weekends and holidays, from the EP's response to submit the matter for arbitration, and you would submit it to our office. Criteria of submission under binding arbitration, acceptable type of charges. You would want to check the supplement to Exhibit D, which is the last page of Exhibit D, to determine if the disputed charges are acceptable type of charge for submission under the binding arbitration. The timeline met initial dispute. The party disputed the charges within the established timeframe set forth in the EP's UIIA addendum, or if no timeframe noted in the EP's addendum, the 30-day timeframe under Section H1 of the default dispute resolution would be met. We do check to see timeframe met to submit the matter for arbitration, so we make sure that the party submitted the claim within the 14 calendar days from the date the EP declined the dispute. If the claim is submitted by an equipment provider, the timeframe would be 14 calendar days after the 30-day timeframe was allowed for the motor carriers to dispute or remit payment of the charge. The required documentation submitted. The party completed the notice of intent to seek binding arbitration form, which is on our website. If you go to uiia.org, scroll down to where it says binding arbitration, and there's a binding arbitration packet that you will need to complete. The first half is a notice of intent to seek binding arbitration. You're going to complete the top half of that form, and then there's an Excel spreadsheet that you're going to complete, and all documents would be submitted to our office all at one time. Again, you would complete the notice of intent to seek binding arbitration to submit your claim against that equipment provider. You're going to submit all required supporting documentation, which includes and is also listed in the packet, basis of dispute. This is an Excel spreadsheet that you would complete that shows invoice date, invoice number, and the amount being disputed, the date motor carrier received the invoice and date EP responded to initial dispute, the specific provision of the UIIA that the company is basing its dispute on. So you just need to state what section of the agreement you feel that the equipment provider is not complying with, copies of the invoices being disputed, the out and in-gate EIR documentation for each invoice being disputed, email communication evidencing the initial dispute of the claim. So you just need to prove that you did dispute it properly with the equipment provider within the 30-day time frame, and that you submit it to our office after the equipment provider's response. So you're going to include the email communication showing that you disputed it, the EP's response, and then we just confirmed that yes, you did get it to us within the 14-day time frame. So everything has to be met in order for it to go through the binding arbitration. For M&R claims, you want to submit copies of any AGS gate images, and those need to be in JPEG format. Any other documentation or evidence that your company believes supports your case, you can submit any screenshots or anything else that you feel that would prove your case to the panel members. Invoice party submits notice of intent along with all of your supporting documentation. At one time, you would submit it to our office for review. Motor carriers may submit multiple invoice disputes under a single claim as long as all invoices involve the same type of charges, identical facts, and the same EP. If it's not the same equipment provider, you have to have two different cases. All arbitration claims should be submitted via email to me, sherry.parnell@intermodal.org. Once the notice of intent form along with the supporting documents are provided, information will be sent to the responding party for a last chance opportunity to resolve the matter with the moving party in the effort to avoid arbitration. And what that does is it saves the motor carrier from paying a $50 filing fee if the equipment provider resolves the dispute within those 7 calendar days that they have to review it prior to our office reviewing it. So you're not charged anything until we have to review the claim. Once we have to review the claim, the motor carrier will be charged a $50 filing fee. And then there's a $250 fee that goes to the motor carrier once the claim is submitted to the panel members. So if it goes through the full process, you're going to be charged $300 total. So it'd be the $50 and the $250. But if you win the case, the losing party is the one that would pay filing fees of the $300. So you would have to send an invoice to the responding party for the $300 to be reimbursed back to you. And then, of course, they would have to cancel or handle the charges under that dispute. Upon review of its dispute, determined that the submitted claim has already been addressed and resolved in a prior case, claim will be dismissed. So what we will do is we will check to see if there's any other claims that had already been through the full process. And if there has, then the claim will be dismissed. A copy of the previous decision will be forwarded to moving and invoicing responding parties. The decision in former proceeding will apply to the current claim. The invoice moving and responding parties will have 14 calendar days to provide additional information on why the precedent decision does not apply to the current claim or why the previous decision poses a conflict with the agreement. So both parties will be provided with a similar case if there is one. They would be provided with a prior case decision. And then if you feel that that prior case decision does not match your case, then you can always come back with comments. And if you do come back with comments, then we would go ahead and put the case through the full process and then have the panel members that are reviewing your claim, they will be the ones to decide in the case. If claim is determined to meet criteria, and it will then be forwarded to the invoicing party, responding party for comment. They will have 14 calendar days to provide comments, and then each party will have an opportunity to review the response to the other party's comments before the case is compiled for arbitration panel's review. If we get no comments back from the motor carrier or EP, then the case would be closed. We would send you it's called a D8 decision. The ruling would be in favor of whoever that prior case decision. The case will be sent to the modal arbitration panel members for review and determination. The arbitration panel members will have 14 calendar days. Again, everything is in calendar days in the agreement to render their decision. Once a decision has been rendered, both the moving and responding party will be notified. The losing party will be responsible for the arbitration filing fee associated with the case. No appeal process is offered under the binding arbitration process. All decisions rendered by the panel are final. All arbitration case decisions are posted on the UIIA website, and that's at the same place that you get your packet, which is on our homepage, UIIA.org. You're going to scroll down and find binding arbitration process, and you can review all of the other prior case decisions, and you can also get your packet there if you're needing to submit a claim. Currently, the members of the IAC Intermodal Interchange Executive Committee serve as the arbitration panel members. IANA maintains a monthly rotation schedule for the binding arbitration panel members. Cases are reviewed by the modal arbitration panel members, In the event the two modal panel members are unable to reach a consensus, then the case will be reviewed by a senior arbitration panel member team. The senior arbitration panel is comprised longest tenured IAC members from the motor carrier, rail, and ocean carrier modes. The final determination will be rendered based on the majority decision of the senior arbitration. Arbitration panels will render their decisions based on the terms and conditions of the UIIA and/or providers' addenda, along with the supporting documentation provided by the involved parties. This is just a breakdown of the binding arbitration case decisions. There was a total of 989 completed cases. This does not include any of the rejected. So there was 989 completed cases. There were 52% that were found in favor of the motor carrier, 39% found in favor of the equipment provider, and then 9% of a split decision. Split decisions are cases where the arbitration panel finds in favor of the parties for a portion of the disputed charges. Frequently asked questions on UIIA dispute resolution. What supporting documentation is the EP required to provide a motor carrier when they issue an invoice? The agreement does not address the specific documentation that the EP must provide when billing a motor carrier. Section E3A2 states the EP must provide factual documentation to support its belief that the motor carrier is responsible for the charges. So it's just stating factual documentation. It does not actually list the exact documents that they need to supply. Can the UIIA get involved in motor carrier and EP disputes involving charges? In IANA's administration of the UIIA, it cannot commercial issues involving charges between signatories to the agreement. IANA can provide guidance regarding the dispute resolution process that needs to be followed and advise each party that they have the ability to submit the matter for binding arbitration. What constitutes an equipment provider's response to a dispute? Section H1 of the UIIA identifies the EP's response is its decision to accept or deny the motor carrier's dispute. Therefore, the communication that indicates that the EP determines regarding the dispute would be considered its response. Ability for equipment providers to suspend a motor carrier's interchange privileges. Exhibit D of the UIIA, which is the item D15, a motor carrier's interchange privileges cannot be suspended for charges under arbitration. So if the invoice is submitted for binding arbitration, the equipment provider would not be able to have you on shut out due to those invoices being submitted. Now, if the invoices were not submitted for arbitration and you're shut out for other invoices, they can go ahead and keep you on shut out for those other invoices. What should the motor carrier do if the EP does suspend interchange privileges for the charges under arbitration? You can reach out to me and let me know, and then I will have the equipment provider confirm that you're shut out due to those invoices that are under arbitration. And if so, then they would have to release your company from the suspension. But again, if the invoices were not submitted for arbitration, they can keep the suspension on your account.
Thanks, Sherry. I think
Okay, sure.
Stacy's going to take it from here. Stacy?
Thanks, Sherry and Debbie. So we're going to take a look at the UI web portal pages. Once you are logged into your account, this is going to be your home page or your dashboard. We're going to start out with your company name, next bill date, access to your current or last invoice. If it is an open invoice, you will see a green Pay Now button. Section 3 is the number of active or terminated drivers in the driver database. Only the railroads use the driver database. So if you're not doing business with the railroads or do not have drivers entered into the driver database, this will show as 0. If your company is also set up to receive driver vehicle examination reports, DVERs, if there are any associated with your company, they will show in section 4. And if you click the right arrow, it would take you to a list of those DVERs where you could open to view the actual DVER. Section 5 is the equipment provider addenda and credit applications that your company can complete right online and sign right online. Section 6 is the view current or pending insurance. It will automatically show current insurance. If your insurance agent has submitted renewal insurance or updated insurance, there will be another box next to the in-place insurance that says check for upcoming renewals or pending insurance. Section 7 in the middle of the screen shows your the number of approved or not approved equipment providers, and the arrow, the down arrow is the download button. You can download a list of those providers. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, the approved equipment providers and not approved equipment providers, you can also view the list there, and there are additional icons that you can click to see for the not approved equipment providers what is actually missing. And lastly, section 8 is the print current insurance button, and that'll just print a PDF of the current insurance that is on file for your account. The UIIA chatbot, we have implemented a live chat feature or deployed a live chat feature. You can use the chatbot to answer questions that you may have regarding your UIIA account. In the lower right corner of your screen, once you're logged into your account, you'll see the chatbot icon. Once you click on that, it's going to bring up a pop-up box and ask you to select a category from the main menu. As long as you are clicking on responses, the chatbot will continue to ask questions. However, if you're not getting the answers you are looking for, or you want to speak with someone, you would just click on that live chat option. It will connect you with an available customer service representative to assist you with the additional questions that you may have. The street turn and street interchange handled through the street interchange application. A street turn being a single motor carrier requesting to reuse an import container as an export. Once you're logged into your account, you would hover over the street interchange tab. You can then click either the dashboard link or the street turn link from the drop-down menu to get into the actual street turn request information. UIIA equipment providers currently utilizing the street interchange application are Evergreen and Mediterranean Shipping, and Hapag-Lloyd when street turns involve a domestic repo move, or full street interchanges that involves two motor carriers. You would enter in the mandatory fields for street turn requests, including the container provider name, the container number, the export booking number, and the originating interchange location. That would be where the unit was initially outgated. Once you've completed the information, you're going to click the next button. You're going to review it, and then you're going to submit it. Once you've submitted the street turn request, it's transmitted to the equipment provider. Once the equipment provider approves the request, the street interchange application system is updated to reflect the approval, and notification is sent via email to both the motor carrier and the equipment provider. If the transaction is rejected by the equipment provider, the motor carrier receives notification via email, and that notification also includes the reason for the rejection. Any questions related to rejections need to be directed to the equipment provider, as the UIIA cannot assist with that. To request a street interchange via the SIA application, you would enter in the container equipment provider company name, enter in the originating motor carrier SCAT code, the receiving motor carrier SCAT code. You would select the type of interchange, the container type and size, enter in the export booking number, the container number, the equipment location where the equipment is currently located, as well as the originating interchange location where the equipment operated. As a note, some EPs also require chassis information to be entered. Once the interchange is requested, again, a request is sent to the container equipment provider and the motor carrier A. Once the equipment provider approves the request, an email is sent to all parties. Motor carrier B, the receiving motor carrier, will then go into their street interchange application and perform the pre-trip inspection based on Exhibit A in the UIIA to identify the condition of the equipment being received by motor carrier B. If no issues are noted, the system will approve the street interchange transaction and all parties are notified. If Exhibit A issues are identified, then motor carrier A is notified. If they disagree with motor carrier B's pre-trip inspection, they can reject the transaction and all parties are notified via email. If they agree, then they would agree and the street interchange approval notice will then be also emailed to all parties involved. The equipment return location directory. So in order to receive notifications from the equipment providers utilizing the equipment return location directory, motor carriers need to set up their notification selections. So once you're logged into your account, you're going to click on the top right corner, your company name, to open up the drop-down menu. You're going to see two links. One is the ERLD notifications, and that will show a listing of the equipment return location directory notifications that have been sent to your company. The second link is the notification settings, which is where you're going to set up where you want your ERLD notifications sent by the equipment providers. The notification settings screens, you're going to go into the ERLD notification tab, and you'll see a listing of the equipment providers using the ERLD. You're going to select the EP you wish to set your ERLD notifications. Once the equipment provider is selected, you'll see a listing of their return locations. On the far left side, you're going to see the intermodal cities. Across the top, you'll see the equipment provider regions. Once you select either the regions or the cities, and you find the location that you want to receive notifications for, you're going to click on the blue plus sign to add an email for that specific location. If you want multiple locations sent to the same email address, you can click on the bulk edit button and it will automatically populate the same email in multiple locations. To receive the notifications for the specific return, again, you'll either want to click on that blue if you have individual email addresses or certain email addresses for individual locations. You can also send notifications to multiple email addresses. You're just going to want to separate those email addresses by a comma with no space in between. And again, you could do the same thing with that bulk email, that bulk edit email. Once you're logged into your UIIA account, if you click on the Other tab across the top of the screen, you can then go down to click on the Access Equipment Return Location directory. This will take you to a screen that lists the UIIA equipment providers that are using IANA's platform for posting equipment return information. Once you click on whichever equipment provider you're looking for, it's going to bring you to their return locations. The below screen is a sample screen of what you will see when you go into the equipment return location directory for a specific provider. You'll start out with the global header, and that is an area that allows the equipment provider to provide a global message to motor carriers about their return locations. Section 2 is the regional header, and EPs also have the ability to include a regional header that's specific only to the return locations within that region. Again, the intermodal cities on your left-hand side displays a list of each intermodal city that the equipment provider operates in, as well as the number of return locations listed within that region. The loaded pickup location, section 4, this column shows the original location where the equipment was picked up. The empty return location reflects the return location for equipment, including the address and facility name. The date column reflects the current day's date if the equipment provider elects to only show the current day's schedule. If the equipment provider elects to display the next day's schedule also, the date here will reflect tomorrow's date. This changes each day to reflect the appropriate dates. The status identifies if the equipment return location is open or closed. The equipment type shows the various types, sizes of equipment that the equipment provider is accepting for that specific day. A check mark indicates the location is accepting that type of equipment, and an X indicates that type of equipment is not being accepted. The last column is the additional instructions, and this contains any type of additional instructions that the equipment provider may have added. Changes to the current day equipment return locations. Any changes to the current day's schedule will be batched and sent to motor carriers at 3 p.m. local time, unless the equipment provider user selects the option to have the notification pushed immediately. Any changes made after 3 p.m. local time will be sent on an hourly basis up until 11:59 p.m. local time that day. Any changes made to the next day's schedule prior to 3 o'clock local time, the business day before, is held to be sent out to UIIA motor carriers by 3 p.m. local time the day before. And the 3 p.m. deadline is based on the region that the return location being changed is located in. If any motor carriers have any questions related to the specific equipment return information posted, should direct those questions to the equipment provider directly versus the UIIA office, as the UIIA office provides the information, but the equipment provider is the one that has submitted that information.
Thanks, Stacy and Sherry. Do we have any questions?
We do.
Okay.
So our first question is, when equipment is disputed as quote unquote not ours, no record or use, the equipment provider always requests that motor carriers prove that they did not use the equipment. How do you prove a negative? How do you handle this with a binding arbitration?
Well, you would provide all the documentation and back and forth communication that you had done with the equipment provider. Many times we've seen where there's been communication with the terminal, and whatever responses you got to that, you would provide all of that documentation when you submit your claim, and you would simply ask that question in your claim as part of your argument that, how can I prove a negative when I'm saying I didn't take this piece of equipment? And like if you have drivers registered in the IDD and there's a driver or something that they're saying took this unit, and that driver was terminated for your company, you could pull records from the IDD to show that the driver was terminated. So, and then all of that information would then go to the arbitration panel, and then it would be up to the arbitration panel to look at the documentation and supporting arguments and make their determination.
Can Hapag-Lloyd street turns be submitted through UIIA?
Most of them do come through the UIIA, but they do have some that they send through other platforms such as Avantita. So if you're not sure, then you should check with Hapag-Lloyd to make sure that that unit is one that you can submit through IANA's street interchange application.
Okay, and our last question, excuse me. FMC states equipment providers have 30 days to bill and dispute and rebill now.
Well, the terms of the UIIA are they have 60 days from the date you return the equipment to bill you for per diem. Most of the providers now that I know of are not billing the motor carrier directly. So a lot of it's being billed back to the customer. But under the UIIA currently, there's a 60-day time frame, but also the UIIA also has a compliance provision in it, which states that all signatories to the agreement have to comply with federal, state, and local laws. So if you have a dispute and you want to dispute that time frame as not being a conflict with federal law, then you could do so when you do your dispute. But that would be first with the equipment provider directly, and then if it goes to arbitration, then you would have to submit your arguments for that as well. But under the UIA right now, the time frame for billing dispute is 60 days.
Okay, and I got one last question that just came in.
Mhm.
In the driver database, what is the difference between deleted and terminated drivers?
Really nothing other than the fact that a deleted driver will not show on your driver roster when you log in. So when we originally implemented the IDD, we only had a terminated status. And then we got some motor carriers that had come back and said, hey, I'm terminating these drivers and I don't want to see 100 drivers showing as terminated. So I would just prefer just to see the driver gone from my roster. So we developed the deleted status that would remove it from your display. So technically, when you delete a driver, we enter a termination date in that driver's record, just like you terminated it. It's just that when you log back in, it will not be shown on your active driver listing. You can always pull them back up by changing the status to deleted, but they just won't be shown for you.
And that is all we have.
That's it. Well, I thank everyone. That concludes our webinar for today. Thank you for taking your time and attending the session. Again, the session was re-recorded. Sherry will be getting that compiled and we'll get that out on the website within a week. We appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to attend, and we hope you found the information helpful. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.